Justice Sherwood was a former Green Mountain boy who became a loyalist and then head of a spy network centered on an island in Lake Champlain, and was tasked with making contact with and developing links to either kidnap or kill people such as Ethan Allen and Ebenezer Allen. Ethan Allen was in communication with Justice Sherwood. Justice Sherwood was the go-between for Ethan Allen to negotiate with the British governor in Montreal or Quebec or whatever. And so Ethan Allen had been captured by the British, and they ended up paroling him and exchanging him for an American officer, and he made certain kind of promises to them in order to not get killed for treason. And then in his negotiations, he put on a false kind of or a strategy where he was telling the British, even explicitly, that he was trying to get Vermont to join Britain, even though that was never his intent. He was just doing that as a kind of strategic ploy. So basically, a year to several years after the end of these negotiations between Ethan Allen and the British, as the British were getting upset and Ethan Allen thought he had just played them for fools, my theory is that Ethan Allen was ordered to be killed for his perceived betrayal and impertinence to the British. And so my theory is that he was poisoned with arsenic when he visited Ebenezer Allen, and one of the agents of Justice Sherwood would have either been there or maybe used some sort of leverage to get some person in that household compromised, and then gave them arsenic powder and ordered them to poison Ethan Allen's drink. So if this theory is correct, then if Ethan Allen's grave is ever located and his remains are located, they could be tested for arsenic poisoning, because the arsenic would still be available in the hair samples today. But there's a lot of sort of confusion about this whole event, about what day Ethan Allen died, when exactly he died. The details are confusing, and why they wouldn't be clear is not clear. And then where he was buried is also not clear. They didn't mark where he was buried. There was a big burial, and then they didn't mark it properly, so that the monument and the headstone didn't end up over his grave. So it's possible that his actual gravesite will never be located. And if you poisoned him with arsenic, there would be a big motive to make sure that the body would never be exhumed. So there's a bit of a conspiracy for you for today. I think I solved the murder mystery of Ethan Allen in Clue. Who done it? Who ordered it? Justice Sherwood would have either ordered it or been the go-between. He probably had the authority to order it, but it might have been passed along through him. And then he would have ordered one of his agents. They had something like many dozens of agents that had completely infiltrated Vermont on behalf of the British Crown to subvert Vermont. Vermont didn't have the counterintelligence to counter the infiltrations of the Crown. And so I'm going to say that's the most likely theory of how Ethan Allen died. He died via arsenic poisoning, and that Justice Sherwood is ultimately responsible for having ordered that, even if he was passing along the order from someone above him. So I've got to make a correction. So Justice Sherwood retired from service as a spy for the British Crown in 1783. And then Ethan Allen died in 1789. So Justice Sherwood likely was not involved in the murder of Ethan Allen. There's a guy named Adil Sherwood who ended up buying the blockhouse on North Hero Island and was also a spy for the British and likely succeeded Justice Sherwood, though it seems they're not related, even though they have the same last name. Adil Sherwood is also connected to Brockville somehow. And so there was also a motive from the Continentals to potentially kill Ethan Allen, as a way to get Vermont to join the states as well. At one point, George Washington had sent inquiries to investigate Ethan Allen that he was being treasonous against the Continentals, even though Vermont wasn't part of the Confederation. So I'm going to say it's still unclear. I think the British had a greater motive because they were kind of led on by Ethan Allen saying that he was going to negotiate for Vermont to join Britain, but then that wasn't his intent, and he got them to change their military plans basically just on his word, and he was just kind of leading them on to protect Vermont basically. But there could also be a motive the from the other side, which is kind of the risk of being independent, being in the middle, that both sides would want to kind of subvert and kind of capture the independent thing. But at the same time, that can create new kind of stresses or the necessity to evolve to defend against such forces if Vermont would have maintained independence. But with Ethan Allen's death, and at that time there wasn't really any coroners or anything like that. There was no potential investigation for poison, but the symptoms of what happened to him are consistent with arsenic poisoning, and arsenic was a common and readily available poison, common form of poison back then. And there were parties who were very motivated to and had cause to kill Ethan Allen, and he didn't have a history of these like seizures, apoplexy or whatever, just like dying in a fit of seizures at a relatively young or middle aged person. And so I'm gonna say that it was most likely the British, but it's not 100% sure. So if I had to put it at a percentage, I would say that it was probably like somewhere between 65 and 80% probable that the British had him poisoned. Or no, I'll go like 65 to 70%, and then I'll say like maybe 20% that the Continentals, and then maybe what does that get us to? Something like 90%, 85, 90. Then maybe like 10% that it had something to do with a more personal thing relative to Ebenezer Allen or someone else there, and then like a 5 to 10% chance that it was kind of a natural seizure situation. Um, so it's not solved. I wanted to solve it, and I won't be able to solve it. But the likelihood is that he was poisoned. And if the body is ever found, this could be proven just by taking a hair sample. But also the fact that they didn't accurately show where the body is when it was such a public funeral, that they would misplace the headstone and mess all that up, seems very, very strange, that you can lose a grave after having such a public funeral that he had. Um, but regardless, I think that all due respect to Ethan Allen, and I don't think that I have been on this. I don't think it's a wild goose chase. I think that he was murdered, and there was just and then he just kind of like disappeared, and there wasn't anyone to really look into it to connect it to the British. But I've read a number of books about all of this, and the number of spies that the British had infiltrated into Vermont alone was really surprising to me. At least one of the spies, I think around Albany, John Stark had hung as a spy, and there were other ones that were kind of caught. But in the documents, it shows that there was like several dozen. There's a whole spy network that was developed by the British into Vermont to connect to the prominent figures and to get leverage on them and to manipulate them or potentially eliminate them. And so perhaps if Ethan Allen had survived, Vermont would have remained independent. But the fact that the states, when they went from a confederation to a centralized federal entity, it basically was just constantly at war and just expanding its borders like an empire thereafter, once the empire had taken control of it, essentially. So had Vermont not joined, it's likely that, well, it would have had quite a bit of warfare ahead of it, most likely, because they probably would have sent those Continentals up against Vermont and the Green Mountain Boys, and then Vermont could have gotten forcibly conquered, and there would be no Vermont. It would just be a bigger northern New York. So I can't say that strategically it wasn't the right move for them to join, though it was also a betrayal of the other towns that had renounced the other states and had joined Vermont on basically all 4 borders. I think there was some up north around like Canada that had done the same thing, but I'm only sure about the other 3, from New York, from Connecticut, and from New Hampshire. And since Vermont kind of secured the peace by joining the Union, but not having any limitations to it withdrawing, it led to where we are today, where people can create their own states out of um, out of the country of Vermont and do so lawfully. And so I'm just demonstrating one example of that, but everyone can do that. If anyone else actually will, who knows? Maybe, who knows what will happen sometimes. Anyways, I'm not even going to get into it, but it is what it is. And for people who associate with Vermont, Ethan Allen is a hero or a founding father. And what he did was wouldn't be very acceptable by today's standards. And yet, that's what Vermont is founded upon. So it would be kind of like if Vermont became independent again, then all the people who were flying the U.S. flag, they would get run out of town, and we would seize their property and sell it and fund and use that money to fund the independent Vermont. That's how Vermont was actually founded. They would just they would run the loyalists out of town. They would make them pledge their loyalty to Vermont, or they would basically arrest them and seize their property and then send them to like prison in some mines, hard labor in the mines, if you're not going to pledge loyalty to Vermont, if you're going to be loyal to the crown. And now that the United States is the same kind of ideology as the crown, is an empire of domination, then it would be the same kind of thing. So that's what Ethan Allen would do. What would Ethan Allen do? He would whip up all the Vermonters into a frenzy, and then he would form a mob, and then he would chase the Yorkers out of town, chase the crown loyalists out of town, and we would just take all of their property and sell it for the funding of the independent Vermont. So who knows if Vermont will have a resurgence? I don't really intend to do anything like that, but I wouldn't mind if there was Ethan Allen around who would do things like that, to be honest. And yep, that's about the end of this video. Long addendum to what was otherwise going to be a short, conclusive thing. But we can't pin it on Justice Sherwood because he was out of the picture. But it could have still been connected to a guy with the last name of Sherwood. And given that I have a random cross-reference with Brockville, I think there's some fire behind that smoke. And yep, leave it there. Thanks for listening to this Ethan Allen thing.